Wildfires are among nature's most destructive forces, often leaving vast areas of land scorched and ecosystems forever altered. These uncontrolled blazes can spread rapidly, fueled by dry vegetation, winds, and human activity. Understanding wildfires requires a deep dive into their causes, behavior, ecological impact, and the ongoing struggle to mitigate their damage. Wildfires begin with a spark, literally or figuratively. Lightning strikes are one of the most common natural causes of wildfires. When lightning hits dry forests or grasslands, it can easily ignite leaves, branches, or dry grasses, and with enough fuel, the fire begins to spread. In addition to natural causes, human activity is another significant contributor. Campfires left unattended, discarded cigarette butts, and even sparks from machinery can start a fire. In some unfortunate instances, wildfires are caused by arson. Once ignited, wildfires can grow rapidly, especially in areas experiencing drought or high winds. The fire spreads across the landscape, feeding on dry vegetation, sometimes moving faster than people can flee. Once a wildfire is burning, its behavior depends on three primary factors: fuel, weather, and topography. Fuel refers to the type and amount of vegetation available for the fire to burn. Grasslands, forests, and even urban landscapes provide fuel that can accelerate the spread of a fire. Wetter ecosystems may slow the fire's growth, while drier areas provide ample fuel to sustain it. Weather is a significant factor. High temperatures and low humidity dry out plants, making them more flammable. Winds play a pivotal role, driving the flames forward at an alarming speed and carrying embers that can ignite new fires several miles away. Wildfires also behave differently depending on the terrain. Fires tend to move more quickly uphill because heat rises, preheating the vegetation above. Conversely, they slow down when moving downhill or across flat terrain. The ecological impacts of wildfires are a complex interplay between destruction and renewal. In the short term, wildfires cause devastating losses to plant life, animal habitats, and sometimes human property. The immediate aftermath of a wildfire is often a charred landscape with little visible life. Forests may lose thousands of mature trees, grasslands may be reduced to ash, and animals either perish or flee in the wake of the inferno. However, wildfires are also a natural part of many ecosystems. Certain plant species, like the lodgepole pine, actually depend on the intense heat of a fire to release their seeds. Fire clears away dead and decaying matter, allowing sunlight to reach the forest floor and encouraging new growth. In grasslands, fires promote the growth of fresh grasses, which in turn supports grazing animals. Despite their destructive appearance, wildfires can help maintain the health and balance of some ecosystems. Human communities face substantial challenges when wildfires occur, especially in regions where urban areas meet wildland. These areas, known as the wildland-urban interface, are particularly vulnerable. Homes and businesses built near forests or grasslands are at constant risk of being engulfed by flames. In recent years, the frequency and intensity of wildfires have increased due to climate change, extended droughts, and the buildup of dead vegetation in fire-prone areas. In places like California, Australia, and the Mediterranean, massive wildfires have destroyed entire towns, displaced thousands of people, and led to billions of dollars in damages. In addition to the immediate danger, wildfires also cause secondary problems like poor air quality. Smoke from wildfires contains fine particulate matter, which can travel long distances, causing respiratory issues in populations far from the actual fire. Efforts to control and prevent wildfires have evolved significantly over time, but the fight is far from easy. Firefighting crews on the ground and in the air use various techniques to suppress fires. Ground crews create fire breaks, cutting down trees and removing vegetation to slow the spread of the flames. Air support, in the form of helicopters and planes, drops water or fire retardant chemicals onto burning areas to extinguish or slow down the blaze. However, these methods are not always enough to contain large, fast-moving wildfires. Prevention is often more effective than trying to control an existing fire. Prescribed burns, also known as controlled burns, are one method of reducing the fuel available for wildfires. These intentional fires are set by professionals during favorable weather conditions, with the goal of removing excess vegetation that could otherwise fuel a more dangerous, uncontrolled blaze. Fire-resistant building materials and defensible space planning around homes can also reduce the risk of damage in fire-prone areas. In the end, wildfires are a natural force of both destruction and renewal. They can devastate landscapes and communities, but they are also essential for the health of many ecosystems. The key to coexisting with wildfires lies in understanding their behavior, mitigating the risks they pose to human life, and allowing natural processes to take their course where appropriate. As the planet continues to warm, and as wildfires become more frequent and intense, it is more important than ever to develop strategies that protect people, wildlife, and the environment from the ravages of fire. By balancing suppression with prevention and recognizing the ecological role that fire plays, we can learn to live with wildfires in a more sustainable and resilient way. Wildfires not only reshape landscapes but also have profound effects on both local and global ecosystems. One of the most significant impacts is on biodiversity. When a fire sweeps through an area, it destroys habitats, leading to the displacement or death of countless animals. Species that are slow-moving or unable to flee, such as amphibians, small mammals, and ground-nesting birds, are especially vulnerable. In forest ecosystems, the loss of old-growth trees can be detrimental to species that depend on these trees for shelter or food. The intricate balance of predator and prey is disrupted, sometimes causing population crashes or booms depending on which animals survive the fire. On a larger scale, the loss of vegetation can lead to erosion, altering the landscape and affecting water sources. When rains come, the lack of plant life to hold the soil together can result in landslides or flooding, further changing the habitat and affecting species that rely on stable environments. However, the recovery process after a wildfire can also foster resilience in ecosystems. Some species have adapted to not only survive fires but also thrive in the post-fire environment. These are known as pyrophytic species. For example, certain types of trees have thick bark that protects them from the flames, while others, like the eucalyptus, have evolved to regrow rapidly after a fire. Fire-stimulated germination is another fascinating adaptation. Some plants' seeds require the heat of a wildfire to break dormancy and begin growing. This means that while a fire may seem like a catastrophe, it can actually trigger new life and increase biodiversity in the long run. The returning plant life creates fresh habitats, attracting insects and small animals, which in turn bring larger predators back to the area. Over time, a vibrant and diverse ecosystem can emerge from the ashes, demonstrating nature's remarkable ability to regenerate. Wildfires also have a far-reaching impact on the carbon cycle. When vegetation burns, carbon that has been stored in trees, plants, and soil is released into the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide, contributing to global greenhouse gas emissions. In a balanced ecosystem, forests act as carbon sinks, absorbing more carbon than they release. However, as wildfires grow in frequency and intensity due to climate change, the balance is tipped. Massive wildfires can release millions of tons of carbon dioxide in just a few days, exacerbating the effects of global warming. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. Rising temperatures and prolonged droughts increase the likelihood of wildfires, and the resulting fires release even more carbon into the atmosphere, further driving climate change. In addition, the loss of forests reduces the planet's ability to absorb carbon, compounding the problem. While efforts to restore burned areas through reforestation are essential, it can take decades or even centuries for a forest to fully recover and return to its role as a carbon sink. In the human context, wildfires often have devastating economic consequences. Beyond the immediate costs of firefighting, evacuations, and emergency response, there are long-term financial burdens placed on affected communities. Homes and businesses are often destroyed, leaving individuals and families without the primary sources of shelter and income. Insurance costs skyrocket in fire-prone regions, and rebuilding can take years, especially in areas hit repeatedly by wildfires. Agriculture is another sector that suffers greatly from wildfires. Crops can be destroyed in a matter of hours, and the destruction of grazing lands impacts livestock farming. This not only affects the local economy but also has ripple effects on national and global food supplies. Tourism, a major industry in many wildfire-affected regions, also suffers. National parks, hiking trails, and scenic landscapes draw millions of visitors each year. But when these areas are devastated by fire, tourism dollars evaporate, and local businesses that depend on these visitors are left struggling to survive. Mitigating the risks of wildfires requires a multifaceted approach that includes scientific research, public policy, and community engagement. Scientists study fire behavior to better predict how and where wildfires might occur, helping firefighters and emergency responders be better prepared. Advances in satellite technology have made it possible to detect fires in remote areas and monitor their growth in real time. Governments play a crucial role in implementing fire management policies, such as regulating land use, enforcing building codes, and ensuring that communities in fire-prone areas are equipped with the resources they need to prevent and respond to fires. Public education campaigns can help raise awareness about fire safety and the steps individuals can take to protect their homes, such as creating defensible space by clearing brush and dead vegetation around properties. On a larger scale, international cooperation is essential in addressing the root causes of increasing wildfire intensity, particularly climate change. Reducing carbon emissions, protecting natural forests, and adopting sustainable land use practices are all critical steps toward a future where wildfires pose less of a threat to both humans and the environment. In conclusion, wildfires are a force of nature that will always be part of the ecological cycle. They can cause immense destruction, yet they also play a vital role in renewing ecosystems. As climate change continues to alter weather patterns and intensify fire seasons, the need for proactive wildfire management becomes ever more pressing. Society must strike a balance between protecting human lives and property and allowing natural fires to play their role in maintaining healthy ecosystems. By investing in research, education, and sustainable practices, we can reduce the damage caused by wildfires and build more resilient communities. In the end, learning to coexist with wildfires is not just about survival, it's about understanding the interconnectedness of life and embracing nature's power, both destructive and regenerative. Wildfires can leave profound and long-lasting scars on the landscape, altering the environment in ways that are sometimes irreversible. One of the most visible and immediate consequences of wildfires is the destruction of vegetation. Forests, grasslands, and other ecosystems that have taken decades or centuries to develop can be decimated in a matter of hours. The sight of once lush landscapes reduced to blackened, smoldering remnants is heartbreaking, but the damage goes deeper than just the visible destruction. The topsoil, which is rich in nutrients and supports plant growth, can be severely impacted by intense heat. When the protective vegetation cover is removed, the soil becomes vulnerable to erosion. Rain, which often follows fire seasons, can wash away this critical top layer, leaving behind barren, nutrient-poor land. In some cases, the soil can become so compacted by the heat that it resists water absorption, creating conditions for flash flooding or further impeding plant regrowth. One of the most striking impacts of wildfires is their influence on water systems. After a wildfire, watersheds, the regions that supply water to rivers, lakes, and streams, can be significantly compromised. Without vegetation to anchor the soil, heavy rains can lead to increased sedimentation in rivers and lakes. This sediment not only reduces water quality but also disrupts aquatic ecosystems by smothering fish eggs and reducing the oxygen levels in the water. In the long term, the siltation of rivers and reservoirs can diminish their capacity, affecting water supply for human consumption, irrigation, and hydroelectric power generation. Additionally, the chemicals and ash produced by wildfires can contaminate water sources. Runoff from burned areas often contains toxins that can harm aquatic life and make water unsafe for human use. Wildfires also alter the flow patterns of streams and rivers, sometimes leading to changes in the local hydrology that persist for decades. The air quality impacts of wildfires can be felt far beyond the immediate fire zone. Wildfire smoke is a complex mixture of gases and fine particles that are harmful to human health. Particulate matter, especially the smallest particles, PM2.5, can penetrate deep into the lungs and enter the bloodstream, causing respiratory and cardiovascular problems. The effects are particularly severe for vulnerable populations, including children, the elderly, and those with pre-existing conditions such as asthma or heart disease. During wildfire season, entire regions can be blanketed in thick smoke for days or weeks, leading to widespread health warnings and recommendations for people to stay indoors. Wildfire smoke can also travel vast distances. For example, smoke from wildfires in the western United States has been known to drift as far as the East Coast, impacting air quality thousands of miles away. This widespread reach makes wildfires not just a local problem but a national and even global concern. In many cases, the recovery from wildfires can be slow and uncertain. While nature has remarkable regenerative capabilities, certain ecosystems take much longer to bounce back than others. In some forested areas, it can take decades for mature trees to regrow, and even longer for the full biodiversity of the ecosystem to return. This extended recovery period leaves the land vulnerable to further degradation. Invasive species, which are often more opportunistic and resilient than native plants, can take advantage of the weakened ecosystem to establish themselves. These invasive species can outcompete native vegetation, altering the ecosystem permanently. In other cases, frequent wildfires can lead to a cycle of degradation, where ecosystems that are not adapted to fire become increasingly vulnerable with each subsequent burn. For example, areas that were once covered in forests may transition to grasslands or shrublands if fires occur too frequently, fundamentally altering the landscape. Finally, wildfires are increasingly seen as a global issue tied to climate change. As temperatures rise and weather patterns shift, fire seasons are becoming longer and more intense. Many regions that were once less susceptible to wildfires are now experiencing them with alarming regularity. For example, the Arctic and boreal forests, which were once considered too cold and wet to sustain large fires, are now facing more frequent blazes. These fires release massive amounts of carbon stored in the permafrost, further accelerating climate change. The global nature of the wildfire crisis calls for international cooperation. Scientists, policymakers, and environmental organizations are working together to develop strategies that address both the immediate dangers of wildfires and their long-term implications for the planet. This includes efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, implement better land management practices, and develop new firefighting technologies. However, without a concerted global effort to combat climate change, wildfires will continue to pose an ever-increasing threat to ecosystems, human health, and the environment.